Dear students, today our topic is about the nature of science. So, firstly, we discuss what is the science. Science is a systematic and logical approach to discovering how things in the universe work. Its body of knowledge accumulated through the discoveries about all the things in the universe. So it's mean that the nature of science refer to the key principles, assumptions, values and practices that are inherent to the scientific enterprise. It explains how the scientific knowledge develops and how it different from other way of knowing. Firstly, we discuss what is the key characteristics of the science. So the first example is the empirical test. So it has been shown that it based on the observation and experimentation. So let me discuss it with one of the example that if the testing of a new medication is effective by randomly assigning participants in two different groups, one receiving the drug which is the experimental group and one receiving a placebo which is the control group. So, the dependent variable, for example, symptoms reduction, is measured and compared between the two groups. So, it's verify our definitions that the empirical test is based on the observation and experimentation. The second characteristics of the science is the testable test. So it shows that the scientific ideas can be tested and verified. So now we take the examples of the plants which are growing in three different conditions. For example, the amount of light the plant receiving in three different time conditions. So it clarify our definition that the scientific ideas can be tested and then verified. The third characteristics of the science is the falsifiable test. It's mean that the scientific theories can be proven wrong. This we explain with one of the interesting examples that we taking the two groups of the same type of the plant. Group A gets the sunlight while group B is kept in the dark condition, which is the control condition. Now we measure their height after a set time. Group A with the sunlight grows taller than Group B in the dark condition. Now the Group A with the sunlight if grow the same height with the Group B in the dark condition, so it's mean that our test is falsifiable. So the next characteristics of the science is the objective test. It explains that it strives for unbiased observation and interpretations. This we explain with examples that if the tomato plants treated with fertilizer X will show a statistically significant increase in the average height as compared to the untreated control group. So our objective was unbiased for observation and interpretation. Other characteristics of the science is the replicable test. So it defined that the scientific finding can be reproduced by others. This will explain with one of the examples of Mendel's primary experiments involved crossing the pear plants, which is the Pisum sativum, that had the contrasting traits. The picture showing that the seeds having the seed shape, which may be the round versus wrinkle, the seed color, which is yellow versus green, the flower colors, which is purple versus white, the plant height, which is tall versus dark condition. Other characteristics of the science is the tentative test. It's mean that the scientific knowledge is always subject to the revision. This we explain with one of the example of tentative experiment. A common example is a simple experiment to test a hypothesis about the plant growth. So in this picture, it has been the observation that the household plant when grow taller when placed near a window. So then we design our tentative hypothesis that if the plant receive more sunlight, then it will grow taller. So in our tentative experiment, we set the two groups. The control group, a set of identical seedlings placed in a room with only indirect low light. While the second group, which is the experimental group, a second identical set of seedlings placed on a sunny window sill. Procedures showing that both groups received the same amount of water, same soil, same temperature with a 4-week experiments. The only difference is the independent variable, which is in that case is the amount of the sunlight. So in measurement after 4 weeks, the average height of the plant in both group is measured, which is the dependent variable. So our tentative conclusion is that if the sunlight plants are significantly taller, the hypothesis is supported. However, this conclusion is tentative because a better experiment, for example, controlling for specific light, wavelength, temperature, variations near the window, or air circulation might reveal other factors are at play or a future events might contradict the findings. So it represent our definition clearly that tentative test should be retested with multiple times. Now the explanatory test. Explanatory test can be defined as the science aimed to explain the natural phenomena. So the best example to explain the natural phenomena again, the Mendel's primary experiments, which is known as the Mendel law of inheritance. This experiment was designed not just to observe the phenomena but to explain the underlying mechanism of heredity. Other characteristics, which is the predictive test, which can explain that science can make prediction about the future events. Now the example is the systematic process that use historical data, statistical algorithms, and machine learning techniques to forecast future outcomes, behaviors, and trends. After understanding of all the types of the scientific methods, now we can define the scientific method is known as the series of the steps used to investigate the natural phenomena. So the first step in the scientific method is the observation. We notice something in the natural world. Second step in the scientific method is the question. Formulate a question about the observation. It's mean noticing a phenomena or asking a specific testable question about how something works. So we take example that why are the living room plants taller than the dining room plants. So in this picture you can show that the living room plants showing the taller in the height than the dining room plants. Then in the third step we design a hypothesis which is propose a tentative explanation. So in our experiment, the hypothesis was plants with more light grow taller. The fourth step is the experiments. Here we design and conduct an experiment to test the hypothesis. For example, we grow the identical plants in high light experimental condition and in low light control condition, keeping water, soil and temperature the same control variable. The fifth step is the analysis. It is basically analyze the data collect from the experiment. So in our experiment, high light plants grew taller. The hypothesis is basically supported. The sixth step is the conclusion, where we draw a conclusion based on the analysis, collecting and interpreting the results of our experiments to determine if the data supports or refutes the hypothesis. Seven, and the last step of the scientific method is the theory. If the hypothesis is repeatedly supported, it may become a theory. For example, publish the findings so others can confirm the relationship between the sunlight and the plant growth. So, after discussing all the types and the scientific methods, now we can explain our scientific method that the scientific method is not linear. The scientist may revisit earlier steps as needed. The science is a collaborative effort. The scientists build in each other work. Science is a self-correcting process, like errors and misconceptions are identified and corrected. So now the question is, why is the scientific method important? It is important because first, it provides a reliable way to gain knowledge about the natural world. Second, it helps us to understand the complex phenomena. Third, it enables us to develop new technologies and solve the problems. And fourth, it promotes the critical thinking and evidence based reasoning. So, this is all about the scientific methods, the step of the scientific methods, the importance of the scientific method. Thank you so much.